Welcome back to esteemed viewers to another edition in our channel, God Money for Wisdom. If it's your first time for tuning in, it's a pleasure. Consider liking this video. You can feel free to share it and subscribe to our channel. Feel free to also hit the notification bell icon so that whenever we upload a new video, it may come your way. Today we want to look at another crucial topic, and which will be how and why Africa came to be dominated and pillaged by the Caucasian white oppressors, and its soon liberation by its great savior prophesied about in Isaiah 19:19 to 22. This is the topic we want to talk about today. As much as it sounds perplexing, as much as it sounds strange, but we'll be able to look at the intricacies of what it is we have today. Now, to commence, we want to first of all mention something very pertinent to all of us, and which is many people, even if you ask a lot of Africans, black Africans, that concerning their history, they will not be able to go past the history of Africa before the Europeans came to invade Africa or to exploit Africa. So a lot of African history is probably lost or even stolen. Once an Oxford history professor said that Africa at the moment doesn't have any history. Maybe in the future, if Africa will get any history, then it will be taught. And another world leader mentioned in front of an African audience that Africa has not really entered into history. These are very disturbing thoughts if you consider it. And you might really wonder, does Africa really have a history? And one other person said that the moment the lions will get a historian, then the hunters will no longer be the heroes. Friends, that is the case for Africa. Africa is the sleeping lion that has been there. That the history of Africa has never been spoken categorically by the very Africans, so that we can know that the people who came and wrote the history of Africa and even stole a part of it are the ones who look like heroes as it is right now. So again, the moment the lions get a historian, then the hunters will no longer be heroes. Luckily, despite the fact that the history of Africa might have been distorted, might have been done whatever was done with it, the Bible has the entire history of Africa, and that's what we want to enter into. So without wasting time, we want to look at a verse in the Bible so that we can commence. Genesis chapter 2 from verse 10 to 14. And I read, it says, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pison. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold." Talks about the first river here being Pison, and it compasseth the whole land of Havilah. Havilah in the Bible, if you look at Genesis chapter 10 verse 7, Havilah is considered the son of Cush. And as we know, Cush is the son of Ham. So you can see very well that this river is passing Africa, because Ham was a black man. Actually, we look at it as we move forward concerning Africa being referred to as the land of Ham, or even the tabernacles of Ham. Let us continue, verse 12. "And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same it is that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia." Here we are. Africa is here exactly. Ethiopia has been mentioned in the Bible as part of the geographical location of where the Garden of Eden was situated. Therefore, right from the onset of the Bible, we can see Africa in history. Friends, this is common knowledge for all of us that the cradle of mankind is Africa, that everything began from Africa. And if you consider Genesis chapter 2 verse 7 says, "And God formed man out of the dust of the earth, and God breathed into him, and he became a living soul." Adam was the color of the ground from whence he was formed. And to be realistic, Adam was a black man. Now, this is not something that someone might think is maybe an irresponsible statement, because it is well known even by historians, and by everyone who cares to find out concerning this type of information, that all the races of the world basically emanated or came out from the black race. All the races is just a transformation of the black race, because that was the original shade. If you look at, for example, the Caucasians who are in the Scandinavian countries, they are lighter skinned compared to maybe the Frenchmen who are in France. Why is that so? It's because this complexion comes about by the climatical conditions that after some time it transforms or evolves into such. So the original race as it is, you find that it is the black man. That is why, as we saw in the previous recording or the previous edition in our channel, that's why God started everything from Africa, and God at this dispensation of the fullness of time secondfold, which he had decided to choose Africa as the end of the road for the Gentile dispensation, so that he can also end everything again with the black race. So moving forward, without wasting time, we want to see that just as you've already seen that there was a river Gihon in the land of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia, that is Cush. And then you've seen there was a river Pison in the land of Havilah, and Havilah was the son of Cush, as you see in Genesis chapter 10 verse 7. Now, let us move forward. What happened then after the flood of Noah? We find after the flood of Noah, we know that Noah had his genealogy. We had Japheth, we had Shem, and we had Ham. And as something ensues, if you look at Genesis chapter 9 from verse 18 to 27, whereby we find the case of what happened to Noah when he was drunk. And many people have said that, oh, I think Ham is the one who was cast after that saga. But if you read very well, Genesis chapter 9 verse 25, you hear that the curse was not to Ham, but the curse was to Canaan. And Canaan was told he'll be a servant of Shem, and he'll also be a servant of Japheth. But the Hamites, or the black men, were not cast, as if you look at the Bible the way it is. Now the question is, who is Ham? The Africans, the black race, originated from their father Ham, who was the son of Noah. So in the Bible, in Psalms chapter 78 verse 51, and I'll beg to read that quickly so that you can see something here. Psalms 78 verse 51 says this, and smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength, in the tabernacles of Ham. Now, God is alluding or is mentioning the fact concerning the way during the time of the Exodus, when the Israelites were leaving Egypt, he's saying that the firstborns were smitten the firstborns of Egypt were smitten, and they were smitten in the tabernacles of Ham. Egypt is what the Bible here has called the tabernacles of Ham. Actually, Egypt is not the country which we have up there in the north as Egypt, because you see these lines of demarcation, these boundaries came about in 1884 in the Berlin conference. So you realize that by the time the book of Psalms is mentioning Egypt, there is no Berlin conference yet, and there are no lines of demarcation. Therefore, we must understand that Egypt was much bigger than the country which we're having there at the north. If anything, if you can take it, and you must, the entire Africa is what was called Egypt. Now, let us look at something here. Psalms chapter 105, verse 23 and 27 says, 23 says this, Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. Now see, you get that Ham was the son of Noah, and Ham, the Hamites, or the black men, we are told they were in Egypt, and Israel sojourned in the land of Ham, that is in Africa. So we can readily understand and very clearly that the entire Africa is what was called Egypt, or the land of Ham, or the tabernacles of Ham. Verse 27 says, they shewed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. So I think we have already seen conclusively that Africa is the land of Ham. You can still look at Psalms 106 verse 22 when you get time. Something else you want to consider, because you want to follow the history of the black man. You want to follow the history of the black Africans so that we can see it categorically right from the pages of the Holy Writ. Now, we know another thing, that Abraham married an Egyptian wife. Now, since Egypt is Africa, the land of Ham, therefore you can understand that Abraham basically married our sister. And you know, when Abraham married Agar, they got a child, Ishmael. And for Ishmael is where we find the Arabs. Therefore, Arabs are just basically the nephews and the nieces of black men. That is what we must understand. We are their uncles. They married their mother was our sister. So that is what we got there. The many people who married black women, like Moses married also an Egyptian. That's a story for another day. But now, let us move forward so that you can follow through this black history and we can find out where the Africans came about, and basically to find our topic for today, which is how and why Africa came to be dominated and pillaged by the Caucasian or the white oppressors, and its soon liberation by its great savior prophesied about in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 19 to 22. Now, let us forge forward. What many people have been oblivious of is the fact that presently, as we know, we are living in the Western civilization. But people have never really known that the greatest civilization, actually the superior, complex, highly advanced civilization that ever was in Africa. Africans had a very highly advanced, ancient, superior civilization. A time whereby we should know that it is the black men who built the pyramids, like the pyramids we find there in the northern part of Africa. It is the black men who built the pyramids with the technology that even the contemporary, the present technology cannot erect such a structure. Therefore, the question is, how is it that Africans, black men with such sophisticated, highly advanced civilization could find themselves being dominated, being pillaged, being exploited by the Caucasian oppressors? This is something we want to look at, and which is very pertinent for all of us to understand. Now, understand that since you have already mentioned that Egypt that we have there at the north presently is not the Egypt that was being mentioned in the Bible, like in Isaiah chapter 19, because Isaiah wrote Isaiah more than 700 years before Christ, and Berlin Conference was 1,884 years after Christ, if we can look at it like that. Therefore, we must understand that it's Berlin Conference that put the lines of demarcation to have a country like Egypt. Meanwhile, the entire Africa was called Egypt, the land of Ham, the tabernacles of Ham. Therefore, when we see in the Bible, in Exodus, whereby the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, we should understand that the Egyptians who enslaved the Israelites were black men. The Pharaoh who was there enslaving the Israelites was a black man, was a black African. It was not the Arabs we see in movies, we see in some movies and all that. No. We'll tell you later on how the Arabs came to find themselves in North Africa, how we find them in Libya, in Egypt, in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Algeria. No, they were not there previously. The entire continent of Africa was inhabited by the Egyptians or by the Hamites, the black Africans. So we should understand that it is the black men who enslaved the Israelites. And according to Genesis chapter 15, from verse 13 to 16, Abraham was told that the nation that shall enslave his physical posterity, that nation shall be punished. Now, how are black men supposed to be punished? The repercussions they were supposed to suffer or to incur were supposed to be commensurate to that which they had perpetrated, because we had put them in slavery. That is the reason why black men were also put in slavery. But how can you put such a highly advanced, sophisticated, complex people who had such a high civilization, how do you put them in slavery? Therefore, God had to do one thing first, before that could materialize. And we find, if we look at Daniel chapter 4, verse 31 to 37, if you just look at the entire story there, we'll find that exactly what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. When Nebuchadnezzar became proud and uplifted himself to show how mighty he was by his own might and all that, God lowered him fully. That he made him succumb to amnesia, or he made him suffer from amnesia, and he found himself eating grass, and the dew was all over his body. When God put him in such a low state for 7 years eating grass, then his senses came back to him after 7 years, and God uplifted him higher than he was before. Friends, what happened to the black men after enslaving the Egyptians? After enslaving actually the Israelites, what happened to the Egyptians after enslaving the Israelites is that you were put to have amnesia that wiped all the intelligence that we used to have when we had this highly advanced, sophisticated and complex civilization. So we forgot all that, and black men found themselves in a situation whereby they never knew left from their right. And that's why the white men or the Caucasians were able to enslave us, which we'll look at deeper in the part 2 that is coming up in this God Manifold Wisdom channel. So stay tuned, don't touch the dial, just look for the part 2. So like this video, share it with a friend, consider subscribing to this channel, leave a comment in the comment section. We, the God Manifold Wisdom community, will love to hear from you. Thank you, and God bless you.